Welcome to Calgary Conversations, a podcast of the City of Calgary where we aim to have frank conversations with city leaders about the issues and topics impacting Calgarians.
Please stand behind the yellow line.
My name is Jose Rodriguez. I am the leader of Media Relations and Employee Communications at the city, and I'm happy to be your host. Welcome back to another episode of Calgary Conversations, and today we're going to talk about the hot topics in the cold weather, and we're lucky to have with us today Chris Hewitt, who is our manager of mobility maintenance here at the city, and we're going to talk about roads. So Chris, what do you do at the city?
Okay, well, I'm part of the team on mobility maintenance. What we do is run a lot of the bigger programs that happen on the roads. So the snow and ice control program through the winter, we sweep the streets in the spring, we repair potholes in the summer. It's all that stuff that's happening on the road surface we look after.
So in Calgary, we're used to going to bed and it's plus 5 degrees and we wake up in the morning and there's a foot of snow on the driveway. What is your team doing at this time?
Well, I would say that our team's been doing already for a few days. Right, well ahead of when the snow comes, we're checking forecasts, we're getting our equipment ready, we're making sure our staffing levels are appropriate, so that when it does come, we're ready for it. Even before, so that night before the snow started, we were probably out putting some material down on some of the spots we were aware of, hills and bridge decks there to make it a little easier to clear once the snow starts. And I hope that if you wake up with a foot of snow, we've probably been working for 12 or 14 hours already, trying to keep it off the major roads.
A foot of snow on the driveway, not a foot of snow on the road.
Well, I sure hope not.
Nice. You talked about some of the material that you're putting down, and we always hear words like pickle, and brine. And can you tell us what goes onto Calgary's roads and when? Because it's temperature dependent, right?
Yeah, sure. Well, let's start with liquids. So liquids we'll often put down ahead of a snow event happening. What those are doing, they're getting the road ready for the snow, make it a little bit harder for the ice and snow to bond to the road. So there we would use brine, which is a salt mix, basically salt and water. We'll use that down to about minus 10 or 12. And that's road temperature. So we'll be putting that on a lot of our major roads, a lot of our bus routes, bridge decks, some of the hillier areas of the city, just to help there when the snow does start. If we're really, really cold, we'll use calcium chloride. That's a mix of calcium, salt, water, good down to a much lower temperature. And then downtown, we actually use beet brine. So that's a lower sodium content liquid that we can put on the roads, and same effect, keeps the road and keeps the snow and ice from bonding to the road.
So when I'm not living the luxurious life of a podcast host, I'm the media relations guy. So I see a lot of inquiries come in every year about beet brine, and it is actually made from beets. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
It is. I mean, that's really all there is to it. Beet extract. And it's it's a much lower salt content than using regular salt brine or much less environmental impact to calcium chloride or salt brine, and so quite effective in our downtown core. And so we've been using that for a few years down there.
So the streets are painted red downtown in some
more of a sweet-looking brown, but yeah, definitely brown. You can tell it if you see it.
Now, how many pieces of equipment do we have out on the roads when there's a snowfall?
So we have a pretty large fleet of in-house equipment. We have over 100 sanders. So that's your typical snow plow, what a person thinks of when you talk about a snow plow. We have got about 30 graders. We've got over 20 pieces of smaller, sort of the 2-ton trucks with a plow. We're using those right now in a bit of a trial. We have lots of pieces of small equipment. So that's like your bobcats, skid steers, things that are doing pathways or over the bridges. And then we have a number of loaders, which we can attach with snow blowers if we need to. And otherwise, they're keeping our trucks full of whether it's pickle or salt, depending on the temperature. They're what keep our trucks full of what they need to put out on the roads.
Well, it's like an orchestra. All these sort of parts got to connect together to make it work, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us, I think we named some of our snow plows a little while back, right? Do you have a favorite?
I'm an old soul when it comes to music. So I think Melton John is one of my favorites. Sweet Child of Brine, another really good one, banger from the 80s.
Love it.
Yeah, so some of those music, but there's lots of fun ones.
So it's funny that you mentioned that because I was thinking about this, and it's I have a bunch of friends who love Darth Blader, right? And I was never really a Star Wars kid. It just, I know it's awful to say, and I'm admitting it here. It's awful to say, but I have a soft spot for Led Zeppelin and Blizzard of Oz. Those are my two favorites. They just speak to me, right? The Force Law and Metalhead just comes out of me when I see those plow names.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones, right? And that was really fun, right? A lot of those, I mean, obviously, you can tell that some of them weren't from kids, but most of those names came from schools, right? Nice. Submissions from schools, so kids were getting involved, learning a little bit about snowplows and naming them, so it was great.
How many kilometers of roadway do we have in Calgary?
So we have just over 17,000 lane kilometers of road.
Wow. Now, does that include the bike paths and walking paths and all that, or just the roads?
That's just on roadway. If you're looking at pathways, we have about 1,100 kilometers. Sidewalks, we have about 6,000 kilometers of sidewalk in the city.
Wow.
So yeah, lots of inventory to look after.
Now, the city does not do sidewalks. I guess we would in some public places. How does that work?
Yeah, so we have just under 6,000 kilometers of sidewalk, all in. The city takes care of about 10% of that, a little over 550 kilometers. So those are things around parks or around city buildings, right, where we're responsible. The majority of sidewalks are the responsibility of adjacent property owners in Calgary.
So if I own that place, I need to shovel my sidewalk.
That's right.
And I think that we've actually upped the fines for that, for not doing it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, so we have a fine structure for that, $250, and it can increase with subsequent sort of offenses in the same year. But really, when you look at what's actually happening, if officers are going out to an area to speak about that, it's typically education and warnings, and people are compliant once that happens, which is great. Not very common that we resort to tickets.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And it is that education piece is always key for us as opposed to finding folks. Windrows. I have to ask about windrows because when a plow comes, sometimes they leave, the wake behind and upset some Calgarians. And maybe you could just talk to us a little bit about how all that happens and how we should deal with that.
Sure. Well, what I would say is whenever a plow goes by, it leaves that wake. Right, you're moving snow from the middle of the road; it's going to the side. So we do create windrows when we're plowing. We know that we will. What we have done with our most recent policy updates is that we are making a very focused effort, firstly on reducing the size of windrows that we leave. Right, so a lot of training for our operators on pulling snow in certain situations and just minimizing the windrows that they're leaving at say, intersections or crosswalks. But what we do is once we've wrapped up sort of the work on our major roads and our snow plan, we get out and we do remove windrows at some of our key locations. And so what those are for us, those are, bus stops, crosswalks, wheelchair ramps, areas where we're inhibiting sort of accessibility and people getting around, by walking or wheeling or biking. And so we really make a focus of that now formally in our program to try to remove those. A couple times a year, we'll go and we'll clear all the windrows around schools. Try to keep that accessible, so the buses can drop kids off a little easier, parents can drop off and pick up kids a little easier. So go back a number of years, and there was really no attention paid to windrows, and now we're really making a focus of trying to keep the city moving from an accessibility perspective.
One of the things that often comes up is snow clearing versus snow removal, and I think I've heard you speak in the past about how if we actually did get into the business of snow removal, it would come with a pretty hefty price tag. Am I right?
It would, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, when we ballpark and removing snow versus plowing it, you're probably looking at 10 to 15 times the cost. Right? When we plow a road, we might use a snow plow, we might use a grader, 1 or 2 pieces of equipment to get that road plowed. If we're removing snow, we're into sometimes 12, 15, 16 pieces of equipment to get that operation running smoothly. So yeah, very big difference in cost. It's rare that we remove snow, although we do get into situations where we have to.
So if I'm right, your yearly budget is about $55 million, is that right?
That's right.
And if we decided to do snow removal, if I'm just doing 10 times, it would be around $550 million?
I think probably not quite that, because you wouldn't do snow removal in all situations all the time. Right? That doesn't really make sense. But if you look at a city like Montreal, for example, So they have a budget of about $180 million. They do snow removal in certain situations. Whenever, for example, in residential areas, if there's more than 10 centimeters of snow, they're doing snow removal. They have 11 snow dump sites around their city, a budget of $180 million. We have 3 snow dump sites. Now, further to that, with our 17,000 lane kilometers of road, they've got about 11. So if you were to look at it that way, we'd probably be somewhere in the region of 250 to 260 million to provide, that sort of Montreal level of snow service.
This is just a weather question. So are Chinooks a good thing or a bad thing for you guys?
Chinooks are both. They're good for the soul because we get some warmth during the winter. They do melt snow. If we have snow, left over on the sides of the roads and we have a good Chinook, we can expect some of that to melt. What that does for us is that means a little less focus on having to remove snow each event, because we know that if we're going to have some good weather coming, we'll create a little more room on the roads with that melt. But they're a challenge too. They're certainly a challenge. If we have a number of Chinooks, we have all these freeze-thaw cycles. We're going above and below zero overnight or even during the day sometimes. We're going to have snow melt. It's going to run across the road. It's going to freeze overnight. The same thing's going to happen on our pathways. And when you get to summer maintenance, we've had all this freeze-thaw. We've had all this water getting into the cracks in the road, freezing up, coming out, going in, and so that causes potholes, right? So when you have a frequent freeze-thaw cycles in a city, much more difficult on your roadway infrastructure.
Parking bans. I don't remember the last time we had one. So how do those work and why do we need them?
So the last time we had one was 2019. So it's been about 5 years.
Who explains? Explains why I don't remember.
Yeah, the way it works is we have signage along all of these are typical on our Priority 2 roads. So these are kind of transit roads, the major roads through communities, where there are also houses though and lots of people parking. So these are our parking ban routes. They have a sign, the little snowflake on the pole there. The time we would call a snow route parking ban is if we're having a lot of buildup of snow on the sides of those roads and the roads are narrowing. And we don't really see any relief in sight. So if we're going to have successive snow events or the weather's going to stay really cold and we're going to have multiple snow events, we can get to a point where we just need to create space on the roads. And so what we do, we call a snow road parking ban, get everyone off the roads, and then it's going to be a mix of really aggressive plowing out to the sides or even snow removal. This is one of the situations where we would consider doing a larger snow removal operation around the city. Just haven't had those conditions in the last few years where it's built up to the point that safety was an issue or roads were narrowing.
In the last few years, have we had more snow, less snow? Have we had concentrated dumps and then some nice weather, which gave us a break? What's it been like, and what's it going to be like this year?
I would say that over the last few years, we have been seeing quite a lot of that, concentrated large events, 25 centimeters plus. For example, just a few weeks ago, over the week, we had about 35 centimeters of snow. That's quite a lot to get in Calgary at one time. If you look at averages, we're typically going to be in the region of 140 to 180 centimeters of snow over a year. 2023 was light. We didn't have a lot of snow. And again, budget sort of reflected that. But this year, 2024, from January to May, so that first part of 2024, we had about 165 centimeters of snow. So we had almost a full year of snow in the first half of 2024. And then you look at, the second half of the season, which is October sort of through December, September through December, we've had somewhere in the region of 45 or 50, I would say, all in over about 3 or 4 storms. And so I think we're going to be well over 200 centimeters this year.
So it's above average year.
24 has certainly been an above average year, yeah.
Wow. And so how does that work then if you have a set budget and you cannot control the weather, so you don't know how much usage will happen with your work? What happens to that money then? Like if we go over, how is it funded? If we go under, where does it go?
Yeah, so a number of years back, 2012, I think it was, we introduced the Snow and Ice Control Reserve. So we have a reserve. At the time, it was capped at $15 million. And what we were doing was if we would have a lighter winter and we would have budget left over, we would put it into the reserve. On years where we had a heavier snowfall and we needed to draw, we would draw from the reserve. And that has been an extremely effective tool. And what I would say is when you're looking at a reserve, if you have a reserve that's always empty, it's obviously not doing what it needs to do. If you have a reserve that's always full, maybe you don't need that reserve. But over the 10 years we've had the Snow and Ice Control Reserve, it really has looked like this. It's been full, it's been empty. And so a really effective tool at saving money when we've had those slightly milder winters, and helping us with some extra budget when needed on the busier winters.
So potholes is always a hot topic with Calgarians. I know we received a report, say a couple months ago, about the state of our roads.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, we're sort of doing an undertaking to really go at them. Can you speak a little bit about our attack on potholes come spring?
Yeah, so what I would say, not to put myself out of work, but the best way to attack potholes is not filling potholes. Yeah. It's repairing roads. It's asset management, and it's repairing roads in a timely way when they need it, and then you don't see the potholes forming. So that report spoke about the overall quality of the city's roads. It has come down over the last decade or so, and so what we've identified is some funding, what we would need in order to get the roads to a place where the potholes are lessened, right? And our overall quality is sort of where we want it to be. So excellent, that was a great report. That was one of my colleagues who put that together. They do the asset management of our roadways. And council responded great to that report. We've, through the budget cycle, we've received some extra funding for our road repair work. And I think people are really starting to pay attention to the condition of assets and those sort of life cycle budget requirements to keep our assets in good condition.
I noticed recently that we have a new machine that just sort of goes over top of the potholes and zaps them like magic, and then it's fixed and you move on to the next one. Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a great new tool. And zapping is pretty close to correct.
What it does.
So basically what that is, it's an infrared heater. We have a panel about 4 by 8 feet on the bottom of it, heats up really hot. What you do, you put it over the road, it heats the road. And will basically heat the road to the point where you can rake the asphalt on the road or reshovel it, almost brings it to new. We'll add a little bit of oil to that just to make sure it's in good condition, the road and the asphalt, that is. And then we fix the surface. So good for a number of things, right? It can work on potholes. It can work on sections of the road that have cracked, which are otherwise quite difficult to fix. So this, leave it over the top of the road for a few minutes, heats it right up, and you can do your repair. One of the real benefits of this tool is that it really reduces the seams we have when we're making these repairs. So with a typical pothole, you're cleaning out a pothole, filling it, but you will have those edges around it where eventually water is going to get back in there. We put a sealant in, but invariably water will get back in there eventually. And cause sort of reoccurrence, where with this infrared heater, the whole area is sort of reconstituted, and so you don't have those seams. So what we're hoping to see is, much longer lasting repairs. So we'll be, visiting those locations over the next months and years to see how they're holding up.
So that infrared machine, pictures I've seen, it's not very big. So I'm assuming the usage for it is very limited to, say, residential streets, or can it be used on some of our bigger roadways? How is it used? Yeah,
so at the moment you're right. I mean, we can do successive areas with it, but the heater itself, say 4 by 8 feet or so. So typically more localized things, but you'd be able to do an intersection over, say an hour. You could do 4 or 5 areas of that size. So you can do some pretty large work with it. So the snow's just fallen. The countdown is on. How long does it take you folks to clear stuff? After the snow stops falling, that's when our clock starts. Right? Okay. We have a 7-day plan. So what we are looking to do right now is we are aiming to have our priority 1 roads. So those are the big ones. That's Glenmore, Crowchild, 16th Ave. We want them cleared within 18 hours of the snow stopping. And before the snow stopping, we've been primarily focusing on those roads, trying to keep them moving. The next part of our network that we're looking to do is priority 2 roads. So these are the major roads through communities, the bus routes. Those are cleared in the next 18 hours. So within 36 hours, we're looking to have all of those major roads clear. Once we've done that, our plan shifts. We get into our residential areas, as well as doing a lot of the accessibility enhancing work. So we're moving windrows from crosswalks, we're moving windrows from bus stops. And so really, that's what our plan looks like. Now, with the recent policy that was approved by Council, while not part of the policy, one of the things we've committed to doing, and Council has supported, is that we'd like to be doing our Priority 1 and our Priority 2 roads concurrently. We'd like to have it all done within 24 hours. And so we're working towards that right now. We have some trials, we have some equipment enhancements that we're looking at to make that happen going forward.
So in short, more roads done more quickly.
More roads done more quickly, right? Help people get around on those community roads, make life easier for transit, right? Mm-hmm. That's the roads they're using the most. And so we are looking at bringing forward our service times on those roads, doing them, like I said, concurrently with our major Priority 1 roads.
Well, Chris, it's been fascinating speaking with you. Is there anything I've forgotten to ask you that you'd like to share?
No, I always like to give a plug to our crews, right? Our staff. They're out there, they are working hard all the time, in particular when it's snowing, right? 24 hours a day they're going, trying to keep things safe for everyone. So, one thing we always say is, they're out there working in less than ideal conditions, obviously, to keep everyone safe. So give them lots of room to work, keep them safe while they're doing it. But really, nothing happens without them, and they're very much experts in this. So.
Thanks, Chris. And your team is the meat and potatoes of the city. Very important for safety and for transport. And this city does not operate without you folks. So thank you very much for everything that you do.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us today. As always, we value your feedback, so please reach out to us at calgaryconversations@calgary.ca and tell us what topics you'd like covered and questions you'd like answered. Until next time, be kind to yourselves, be kind to each other, and if you see someone without a smile today, give them yours. Take care.